Hello everyone and welcome back to Knowing Wheel, episode 89, is it Jamie?
89, I believe. Yes.
89.
We forgot to shout out Rio Haryanto last week because they're a big
We
shame.
did forget to do the Rio Haryanto tribute show last week, but this is going to be the Rio Haryanto plus one tribute show then, I suppose. But yeah, before we get into it though, as always, Jamie, how are we doing, mate?
I'm good. There's a World Cup match going on right now, so if you hear some noises, my half Korean housemate is watching Korea probably lose to Brazil. So
I think they might
apologies
already
for that.
be losing to Brazil, aren't they?
Yeah, they are 2-0, which is a shame, but there we go.
Aren't we 10 minutes in?
Yeah.
I don't fancy South Korea's chances anymore.
No.
But we've got more important things to be dealing with tonight. You know, the World Cup, it don't really matter to anyone, does it really, nowadays? We're back this time round, of course. If you missed out last week's show, we went through and, of course, reacted to our predictions and where the real-life F1 2022 season finished. I would highly recommend going back and checking that out. But today, we are returning with the most anticipated video of 2022. It's time for another tier list. This time round, we're going to be ranking all of the 2022 drivers. Now, sadly, we couldn't find a tier list that had Hulkenberg and De Vries in it that also isn't filled with random other clutter. So, I mean, looking at this, we've got Kimi Räikkönen, we've got Robert Kubica, Pietro Fittipaldi. I think the funniest one is Roy Nissany and Nikita Mazepin.
Yeah.
But we're just going to be going through the drivers that actually raced in 2022. Now, are we going to do this in reverse championship order, Jamie?
Yeah, let's do it. Do you know
Let's
the
do it in
reverse
reverse
championship order?
Roughly.
Okay.
But before we get into that, of course, as always, links down below in the description as well. Of course, Spotify, Manscaped, F1 merch, Bybit. It'll all be linked down below as well if you want to go check stuff out. And yeah, definitely would be greatly appreciated if you give us a follow over on the Spotify. 38% of you that listen to these on Spotify are following. So what are the other 62% of you doing? Get following now. Let's jump into this though. Last, of course, in the real life 2022 season, Jamie, and probably the worst driver of the year. It's Nico Hulkenberg.
The worst driver of 2022. That's outrageous from you to begin with.
Just thought I'd get that bait in there.
What was it? 2 races at the start of the year, having not...
really bad Aston Martin.
Really bad Aston Martin. Was 1-1 versus Stroll in quali and race in that time.
Which is not that good.
Which is not bad.
Against Stroll, mate.
Well, having not had a pre-season and never driven the car before, it's not that bad.
Yeah, I suppose.
I mean, it was nothing special. He did basically finish last of the drivers who finished in both races.
Well, he got taken out in Saudi, didn't he?
No. Oh, did he?
Did he?
I
No.
don't think so.
Was it Stroll that
Stroll
got taken
took
out
out
Saudi,
Albon right at the end for no reason.
Yes, sorry, I do remember. So it would have been 2-0 to Stroll.
Yeah, in the race, yeah. But having not had any pre-season or winter training, that's not that bad. I would go average. It was nothing special, but it was solid, which is what you can expect from Hulk.
I think average is completely fair. Like we said, he had no winter testing, no sort of pre-season, anything like that. Got called up again. He didn't quite deliver the heroics that he did in 2020, but, Nico Hulkenberg did his thing and, helped Aston Martin out right when they needed him. On to position 21 then, Jamie. It's our other reserve driver who actually got the call up in 2022. It's Nyck De Vries.
Indeed, and yeah, it kind of all came together for him, didn't it? The one race, it couldn't have gone much better. He was nowhere near getting a 2023 full-time drive, and then one bit of luck with Albon unfortunately having, was it tonsillitis or some other illness? Appendicitis,
I think,
yeah. It all fell together to have appendicitis at Williams' best track of the year. And De Vries, to be fair to him, did a very good job. Obviously, the bar of Latifi is fairly low to beat.
Pretty much on the floor, isn't it?
But he did well, and he's earned himself a 2023 drive, as has Hulkenberg, actually, which is quite curious. But yeah, I think probably average as well. Obviously, only one race. It's quite hard to judge. Maybe good. Maybe good's fair.
I was going to argue there for good, to be honest with you. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, we've discussed this before, haven't we? It was really the perfect storm for Nyck De Vries. He came in at a track that Williams were going to be fairly competitive at. He did quite well in qualifying, of course, to get into... I think he made Q3, didn't he? Or he started inside the top 10 because a lot of other people had grid penalties. And, of course, that Williams, as we've seen a few times this year, especially around the high-speed circuits, just can sit in front of other cars and they can't really do anything about it. They can't overtake. If he got jumped, then he was out of it.
Yeah.
But 2 points on his F1 debut in a Williams in this day and age, that is good in my eyes.
Yeah.
I think good is a fair rating there. P20 then, Jamie, and last of our full-time runners. It's the GOAT himself. He's not returning for 2023. It's poor old Nicholas Latifi.
Yes. There's one category that stands out for me in this case. And that is different gravy. No, it's not. It's trash. He had his time. He did it okay in his 3 years in F1. Helped Verstappen to a world championship, and then peaced out, and now he's gone.
Pretty much. You've summed it up pretty well there, to be honest. I mean, again, it kind of felt like, we spoke about Latifi towards the end of last year, didn't we? And it felt like he was starting to make a bit of progress, of course, in those last few weekends. Part of that was probably due to George Russell basically checking out of Williams and not worrying anymore. But, Latifi had a couple of promising races in 2021, and really with the exception of Suzuka this year, and Britain qualifying, it just never really materialised for him, and even Suzuka was pretty much luck-based anyway. Was further off Alex Albon this year in terms of qualifying average than he was off of George Russell last year as well. Just never really adapted to the car or pushed on, did he? And to be honest, he was probably quite lucky that he came into Formula 1 when he did, with COVID and Williams struggling, because there's no way a driver, let's be fair, his lack of talent should be in F1 for 3 years.
Yeah, I think, basically, you've summed it up pretty well.
Thank you very much. P19 then, Jamie, overall. It's young Alex Albon, and what a feel-good story it was.
Sorry, that sounds like a Brazilian goal.
Oh, it's Brazil scored again, have they? Alex Albon, though, what a turnaround it's been from him after his forced sabbatical.
Yeah, and it's actually fairly common among the drivers now for... some weird reason. A lot of them have had a year out at some point in their career. Or maybe not a lot, but a few. Certainly more than you would expect. And most of them come back and they haven't really lost anything, which is quite impressive. And it was kind of exactly what he needed. Obviously quite a friendly, low-pressure environment almost. And he's basically thrived. Like, dragging out Williams to places it definitely shouldn't have been. And, I think the impressive thing wasn't just the points, but it was also almost guaranteed he would be the driver to pick up the P12s, the P13s, which is 6 or 7 places above where Williams should be, and just pick it. And unfortunately, there's no points for them. Obviously, and you don't get much recognition. But he was always there. He didn't really throw it in the wall very often. He never got involved in that many scraps, and he was just very, very solid throughout the whole season. I would argue for great, maybe for Albon. It might be a bit excessive, but it's at least good. I would definitely say that.
I think definitely, I was gonna say good, definitely better than De Vries, of course. Like you said, obviously you've wrapped it up quite nicely there. But Albon just had a quietly consistent year, and absolutely cemented himself as a dominant Williams number one against Latifi. Because it could have been quite easy, couldn't it, after a year out for him to come back in, struggle to adapt to the Williams, be quicker than Latifi, but not by much, and just not really convince them that that's what Williams needed. But he ran a very, very good year. Like we said, quietly picked up a lot of decent results for the team. Of course, there were some weekends where Williams were just nowhere. And of course, he could only just finish ahead of Latifi. But there were a lot of weekends where if they were close to the few teams in front of them, we could get in the mix there.
How many races were there this year? 23?
21.
21, okay.
22? 22.
Well, Albon obviously missed one in Italy. But he got 13 P13s or above.
Yeah.
Which is like pretty incredible.
That's mega.
A car
in a Williams car that was last. I think you've convinced me, Jamie. We're putting him in great season. Alex Albon, after being a bit worried that he'd come back and still be a bit mediocre, he kind of had a bit of a year, didn't he? Like he had in the half season he was at Toro Rosso.
Yeah.
Where he just picks up good results. He clearly is a very, very good midfield driver.
Yeah, I don't think he's obviously had his shot almost at the top team. I don't think it will certainly be a long time before he gets another one of those. But he's certainly a driver similar to the likes of, Ocon or Gasly or those sort of midfield level drivers who are perfectly good, and he had a very great season. So
I think it's very difficult as well, of course, because that Red Bull team, especially with Gasly and Albon there, it's kind of that weird thing, of course, of on paper they had a front running car, but my God, it must have been an absolute hog to try and drive for him. Yeah. Like, it was never really a fair shot at the front, was it?
Not really. I mean, I'd like to see him get another go in a few years, maybe, but I don't really see it personally. Unfortunately,
you just don't want to see him at Red Bull for it, do you?
No,
I think this is the problem, isn't it? Because Red Bull are such a team just geared to Verstappen. I mean, what we've said it before, haven't we? Red Bull are probably looking for Lando Norris as their second. It just makes sense. But you're just not really going to get a chance. You're not going to get a fair chance up against Max, are you? Anyway, irrespective of how good Max is. It's a team completely set up for Max and around Max, so of course they're going to give him a car that suits him. It's just a shame for pretty much every other driver
his driving
in the
style
world
is ridiculous.
that his driving style is bizarre. But it is what it is. Talk me through our next driver then, Jamie, who, if I'm not mistaken, is Zhou Guanyu.
Indeed it is. And he is obviously Rookie of the Year, which is nice. Won that award at Autosport over the weekend, which is cool. I think on paper, if you just look at the points, it looks quite bad compared to Bottas, but we've gone over it many times. The car was rapid at the start of the year, and then as soon as Zhou was on par with Bottas, the car was no longer capable of scoring points on a regular basis.
I think on par is strong.
Maybe not on par, but
close
as
to
soon as
Bottas.
He was getting closer, definitely. And yeah, I think it was a perfectly reasonable rookie season. Obviously, Bottas is a really quick driver who just can't really race people, and Zhou did very well against him. Certainly respectably well against him. I think good would be fair for this. I think Albon's probably doing better. But if he kicks on, he's certainly laid a good foundation. Obviously only 6 points is a little disappointing, but the amount of times he lost points to reliability and also just the car wasn't there at the times when he was good at the end of the season is a shame for him, but he can kick on next year.
Exactly, and like we said last week, he cemented himself within that Alfa Romeo team and proven that if he is still a placeholder for Airport Chair in the future, that maybe another team will give him the call up down the line. I think good is completely fair for Zhou Guanyu for a debut year. I'm going to put him below De Vries though.
Okay.
Is that fair? All I'm thinking is just obviously De Vries came in a worse car and scored points immediately. Yes, it was only one race, and it was, as we said, a lucky one. But he did come in and immediately deliver where Zhou Guanyu didn't.
Well, what did Zhou do in his first race? Score points? Oh, yeah.
Did he? He
scored
a point.
10th place.
He did score a point, didn't he? Fair play, yep. You're absolutely right. You know what? I'll give you that. I had forgot that, to be honest.
There you go.
I will give you that.
The Zhou propaganda is what I excel at, so there you go.
Exactly. Who's next up, Jamie? Is it Yuki Tsunoda?
It is P17 for Tsunoda.
Tough year, wasn't it?
And he had all but one of his points by Spain, which is kind of mad. He got 12 points over the course of the year. Obviously, the AlphaTauri was not the AlphaTauri of 2021, which was a problem for him. And it's really hard to judge both drivers against each other, really, just because the car was so inconsistent. And obviously the peak in Baku, where Tsunoda was probably on for P6 when he had the DRS failure.
Yeah.
That obviously cost him 8 points, which is hefty when he only scored 12 across the season. But yeah, it was somewhere between good and average, I would say. He was still lost to Gasly, but he made big steps compared to 21. But I think he's going to be under the knife again in 2022. That's an operation, isn't it? Under the hammer. I don't know the saying.
Under the microscope.
Under something. Under Helmut Marko's microscope, that's for sure. In 2023. I think this was the thing, wasn't it, for Yuki? Because let's be fair, he didn't have a particularly great 2021. He has certainly pushed forward in 2022, but if he doesn't, at the very least, match De Vries next year, I think that might be him on the way out of the AlphaTauri. On paper, he should be the team leader, just based on experience in F1. But obviously, De Vries has had way more years of experience racing. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
It will be very, very interesting to see how that team dynamic plays up next year. And AlphaTauri 2023, of course, have got by far and away the shortest lineup in F1. But yeah, I think a good average.
I think top of average. He was all right.
Better than Hulkenberg still. Moving on though, is it Lance Stroll up next, Jamie?
It's Nicholas Schumacher.
Oh, sorry, I completely forgot about Mick, as did most of us this year, because let's be fair, it was not particularly great.
No, it certainly wasn't. He kind of spent the first half of the year crashing, and then turned a corner for 2 races, and then it all went wrong again, and he just never really picked up. Obviously, the 2-point scores in Britain and Austria were definitely the high point, and if he'd have kicked on from that and actually delivered some more points consistently, maybe they'd have given him another year. But unfortunately for him and all his fans, that just didn't happen. And yeah, no more points after Austria when Magnussen, he got a couple more ninth in USA and the pole position and 8th in the sprint in Sao Paulo. So it wasn't exactly, the car definitely wasn't.
The car kind of fell apart, didn't it? That was kind of the problem as well. It didn't help Mick Schumacher, and I mean, again, he was unlucky not to score points in Canada. Let's not forget that as well.
Was a liability.
And Miami, where he crashed into Seb.
Don't have any sympathy for that.
No, nor do I. But it was, it's been a tough year for Mick, hasn't it? Really, I think this is the problem, isn't it? We kind of, it's kind of helped us realise as well just how beyond awful Mazepin was last year.
Yeah.
The fact that Mick wiped the floor with him, and Mick's, I think we've kind of agreed, haven't we, in the past, that Mick was pretty much the second worst driver in 2022. He was only really better than Latifi, to be honest. And I know a lot of people don't like hearing it, but
there is a reason he's
better than anyone else. Yeah, exactly. It's not nice. It's a cutthroat world, Formula One, and unfortunately, Mick Schumacher. Again, we're still adamant there's something else going on there down at Haas.
Yeah, I think
whether there was a lot of beef behind the scenes.
They like drivers who are very easy to work with, and I feel like for all the
we've got K-Mag.
He's very matter of fact though, isn't he? Matches Gunther Steiner quite a lot.
Yeah, I suppose.
But with Mick Schumacher, there's so much background and complications from the Schumacher family and influences there. It probably just isn't what they want, so they've got rid.
Yeah, difficult, of course. And I think we're intrigued to see where Mick Schumacher goes from here. But I think bad is probably fair.
Yeah, I think so.
Like we said, only really better than Latifi this year. Not a season to remember for young Mick. But, perhaps again, like we've said with a lot of other drivers already, pretty much every other driver on this board, with the exception of Zhou Guanyu and Latifi, and Tsunoda, so half of them, they might take a year out and then come back.
Yeah, true. And, Schumacher, obviously, he's got ambitions to stay in Formula One. He's probably, if he got another shot, I don't think I'd be that annoyed.
No, it depends where, doesn't it? Really,
it
I think. But we'll wait and see as to what happens to young Mick in the future. Then now is it Lance Stroll, Jamie? I keep staring at his big grin.
Yeah, and he's had such a typical Lance Stroll season, where he's just quite inoffensive. He's just sort of there, doesn't really qualify that well, gets good starts, picks up points here and there, and loses to his teammate. That basically.
The Lance Stroll system. It's not failed him so far with Daddy's cash, has it?
And he's, to be fair to him, he's obviously a much better driver now than he was when he came into F1 super raw at 18, which is 6 years ago now? 2017?
2017 he came into F1, which is mad to think about.
Yeah, so he's clearly an adequate driver, but I don't think he's ever going to go much more than that, unfortunately.
I mean, let's be fair. There's one word to describe Lance Stroll, isn't there, in Formula 1, and that is bang average.
Yeah.
Bang average.
Yeah. And I think he shows flashes of speed, but it's never really going to amount to anything.
No, he's never quite going to have the consistency to hook up a full season or anything like that. Even if Aston Martin do give him a car that can deliver next year, Fernando Alonso is absolutely going to destroy him.
He's licking his lips.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wonder how many letters he's going to be sending to his dad about Alonso was mean to me again.
Get rid of Alonso.
Did this. Alonso did that. Daddy, it's not fair. I reckon Lance Stroll is the kind of guy that still calls his dad Daddy.
I don't want to think about that, to be
just like
honest.
Rich, like Daddy, it's not fair. That sort of thing. You get what I mean? Do you get the vibe?
Less about your life, Matt. Let's move on to
what? What?
Let's move on to P14, which was Pierre Gasly.
Pierre Gasly.
Yeah, and I'm a Gasly sympathiser. I've got too many drivers.
You're
to call
a Gasly
myself.
fan, Jamie.
I can't be a fan of like 6 drivers. I'm not one of them.
You are though. You are. That is just you in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think it was a poor season from him compared to 2021, but the car didn't help.
But it was a car kind of exposed that, didn't it?
Completely, and he was consistently okay, but the car was just never really there for those results that he was pumping in 2021, which was a shame. But he still pocketed Tsunoda quite comfortably, It was a bit closer than the year before, but still.
Yeah, it was shaky early on, wasn't it, if I remember correctly?
But first 5 races or so, but after that it was mostly fine.
Gasly kind of got back up to speed and just kind of kicked on from there in a way that Yuki just didn't quite seem to.
And I think, obviously, the 5th in Baku was easily the highlight of the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good, I think. It was not anything super special. But yeah, I think it was definitely a good season for Gasly. And he's obviously got a big move to a manufacturer, which hopefully he can kick on. And that'll be a very curious lineup next season of who's going to come out on top. I think that's a really hard one to call.
Well, Ocon's better than Alonso, so he's going to wipe the floor with Pierre.
Okay, then. Russell's clear at Hamilton, then get him 8 titles.
Exactly. He'll get 8 titles, don't you worry about that, my friend. I think Gasly a good year, wasn't it? You know, a bit under the radar, a bit quiet, but it's just been a strange year of AlphaTauri not really giving him a car that was capable of fighting. Is it Kevin Magnussen up next, Jamie? We're really testing my ability to remember the F1 standings in reverse.
Yeah, Kevin Magnussen came 13th for Haas. And again, another one off the back of a year out. He hit the highs, he hit the lows as well over the course of the season, as we kind of expect from K-Mag. Very, very good. But interestingly, he did, in terms of race head-to-head, he did lose to Schumacher. Because Magnussen basically was either on for scoring points or he just didn't really bother trying.
Nowhere.
Yeah. But when he did score points, obviously the 5th in Bahrain was incredible. And then, of course, the pole position in Brazil. I think very, very solid season. He's kind of earned his shot 3rd time round in F1. Very well indeed. He beat Schumacher fairly comfortably. Obviously, a lot more points. 25 to 12 against Schumacher. And just that pole position just crowned the whole season. His successful return, and he's kind of everything that Haas would have expected, I think. Yeah,
exactly. Well, I expected because he's been there before, so they already know what they're dealing with.
They quite well knew.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of funny, isn't it, when you still think back to the start of the year, the fact they used all of Mazepin's money, and then they probably wouldn't have scored points this year with either car if it wasn't for Kevin, because of course he's probably been able to help steer the setup in the right direction in a way that Mick Schumacher still probably wouldn't know. So to be honest, there's a very real possibility that had Kevin not come back, Haas could have been last again in 2022, and that might just well have been them down and out of Formula 1. I think a good year though for Kevin Magnussen. It's quite sort of nice to remember like the Bahrains and the Brazil pole and this, that and the other. Haas always come out of the gate strong at the start of the year. We don't know why, it just seems to happen. Austria as well is always a really strong track for them. Again, we don't really know why, it just seems to happen. And then obviously that Brazil qualifying lap was a bit special, but as you mentioned, throughout a lot of the year still, despite those highs, there were also quite a lot of quiet moments. And I think, the fact that Albon, I reckon, probably had a better year than Kevin Magnussen when you think about how less of a car he had.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think good is fair. Interestingly,
top are good.
Magnussen did score in every sprint, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah,
just looking back, which is quite funny. But yeah,
not many drivers can lay claim to that, can they, this year?
Were the sprints that mixed up? I think a lot of them probably could. Well, maybe certainly the top six.
There's probably only 5 or 6 drivers that scored points in all 3.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah.
Who's up next, Jamie? Is it Sebastian Vettel?
It is Sebastian Vettel, winner of the Lifetime Achievement Award and winner of his own side pod. Did you see that?
He did win his own side. Did he actually win it? Did he?
Well,
I saw the clip of him wondering if he did.
I saw a picture of his bid winning. I don't know if he actually won it in the end.
Oh, fair enough. I didn't know for sure whether he had actually won his own side pod.
We're trying to flog his side pod for auction. And Vettel wanted it, so he placed his own bid. So fair play.
Why not? To be fair to him, I don't blame him for that.
Yeah. Very good, I think. It was, kind of, obviously it didn't start very well with getting
shaky beginnings, wasn't it?
COVID
we really did think he maybe called off his retirement 1 year too late, but you know what? We got some prime Seb later on in the year.
Yeah, that Suzuka lap. The lap in Abu Dhabi in qualifying as well. And just, consistently being really good across, certainly the second half of the season. It kind of picked up as the Aston got better.
Martin did. Yeah.
And the comeback in Japan after being last by turn 1 obviously helped by the fact he had nothing to lose by going for Inters.
He basically did the same as Latifi, and we said Latifi was all luck. So
yeah, it was quite lucky, but he still qualified well in the first place, just to spin off and then come back. So you know what, I think Seb did really well this season. Obviously, he's a 4-time champ, and the highs were not quite as high as they once were for him in the Aston Martin, but I do think it's been maybe a great season for Seb. Maybe I'm just being nostalgic because he's leaving.
You know what? I think we're both going to be a bit nostalgic here. I also think he had a great season in the end. You know, shaky start, but brought it back well. And I think, you know, for how much sort of stick we've given Seb over the last few years, I think, you know, I wouldn't say exactly that we've been thoroughly mugged off this year, but I think he has proven himself. You know, Jamie, actually, in my Driver of the Year vote, he came second overall.
Wow,
he was the second best driver in 2022.
That is nostalgia mentality.
There was a lot of nostalgia there, I tell you what. But, yep, Seb, fair play to him. Hats off. He had a good fun last year, and I think a great season. I'm sure that's how he'd describe his year. I reckon he'd describe it as a great season.
Yeah.
Who is up next? Is it Bottas?
Was Daniel Ricciardo.
Oh, yes.
Who, is quite lucky to only be, 5? Well, there's only 3 drivers between him and Norris.
Yeah.
But there's
a lot of points.
100 points.
Yeah.
He is lucky that he kind of, got the points in at certain points. Obviously, Australia was really good at the start, and then kind of Mexico. And also finished 5th in Singapore, which people might forget. But
yeah, McLaren had a really good weekend at Singapore.
They did. It was straight up bad. I'm going to say it. It was not Ricciardo's finest hour or finest year.
Finest many hours, yeah.
No. So, he's obviously out for a year now. Maybe out forever, but...
I'm not convinced he's coming back, bless him.
Yeah.
I think that
might
be the end of the
It's
F1
a real
road
shame
for Danny
to
Rick.
see him on his way out, but... Yeah, he just didn't really have it against Norris, and it might be because Norris is one of the best on the grid, and I think he probably is.
I think people forget that. Yeah.
But it's a shame to see Ricciardo such a fall from grace, even from like 2020, where he was fairly good at Alpine, Renault back then.
He was pretty good at Renault, yeah.
And then just even 2021, he at least had the highs to bail out the poor qualifying against Norris. This year, there's just been nothing really to shout about at all.
No, he kind of got carried along, didn't he, into this year with that win at Monza, and this year there's been nothing really to show for it, with the exception of a couple of okay results that really were far too far in between. I mean, he's kind of like Mick Schumacher, wasn't it? He had 2 or 3 races that were pretty good, and the rest of them were pretty woeful throughout most of the year. So I think a bad season by any stretch for the poor Daniel Ricciardo, especially as a multiple Grand Prix winner. Let's go on then to someone else who, to be honest, had a bit of a year like Alex Albon, didn't he? Not quite from a year out, but just got the job done, picked up very, very good points early on in the year, and once again proved that might not be able to battle wheel to wheel still, but when he's in the zone and when he's by himself on a track, he is still a force to be reckoned with. And that, of course, is now the middle-aged Australian man that is Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, going through his midlife crisis a little early.
That is such a vibe. I love that.
It was a really odd season for Bottas. He definitely made the most of the car when it was quick, which was the first 8 to 9 races of the season. Almost like basically comfortably being best at the rest most of the time, and arguably he's annoying Mercedes on quite a frequent basis. But then that weird spell from Britain to USA, no points at all, and then got a few towards the end in Mexico and Abu Dhabi, but it was just sorry, not Abu Dhabi, Mexico and Brazil for Bottas. It was a very, very good season, obviously the first out of the Mercedes umbrella since 2016, and even then Williams, so but I think he's certainly proved that he's worth a space on the F1 grid, which a lot of people are saying, what's the point of carrying on when you're not going to get a chance like you were at Mercedes again? But you know what, there's more to F1 than just the drivers who are going to win championships, and I think we can say that Bottas isn't one of those drivers, but he's here for the ride, and he certainly made the most of it in this year.
Yeah, exactly. You think it was certainly going to be an interesting year for Bottas, wasn't it? Like we said with Albon, he did need to push on quite well with Alfa Romeo. Obviously, frustrating time still. That really unforced error at Kota that potentially cost him a couple of points that weekend. But, he was comfortably quicker than Zhou throughout quite a lot of the year still. You said Zhou was on pace with him a lot. There were still a few weekends sort of dotted around, like Mexico, for example, where Bottas was just leaps and bounds ahead of Zhou still. And then, of course, just went backwards during Grand Prix, unable to battle other cars. He just desperately needs to learn how to race wheel to wheel.
Yeah.
And he could be, again, a very, very good driver. But I think bottom of great season.
Yeah, I think
fair?
A tier above Zhou is definitely fair, considering the points gap and qualifying gap.
Yeah.
Fair play, Valtteri. Good season.
Good man.
Great season.
Are we on to the Alpines
We
next?
are. Fernando Alonso.
Yeah. Let's get him into trash.
Oh, there we go. Have him every week. Get your comments in. Alonso was quality this season, and I don't want to hear otherwise. I'm maybe not different gravy, but he has to be in great, at least for me. He was generally quicker than Ocon in qualifying, and definitely would have outscored him.
Not by much, though.
Had the car worked. Just being super smooth all season. And the car just let him down so frequently. And here comes Matt to say that he's trash.
No, I think, Alonso again did have a very, very good year. 6 mechanical failures, if I remember correctly. A lot of points lost because of that. He probably would have been world champion in his eyes had he not had those mechanical failures. But I think, a great season from Fernando Alonso was certainly fair. To be honest, what I was actually thinking about is where do we rank Ocon in comparison to that? Because Ocon wasn't actually that far away from him throughout a lot of the year. And let's not forget that there were quite a few weekends as well where Ocon was the number one within that team.
I think Alonso was more often than not ahead.
More often, Alonso was the number one. Yeah, don't get me wrong.
It wasn't like a trouncing at all. Ocon was very respectable.
It's not like what's going to happen at Aston Martin next year.
No. And Ocon is certainly very capable of claiming a very good season, because it was. But I do think that Alonso has to go in great, and I think Ocon at least is in good. I would maybe bottom of great as well, because Alpine this season were very un-Alpine in the way that they actually were a capable team. Other than reliability, which I guess is quite important.
I think it would be unfair to put Ocon in a different tier to Alonso when he outscored him.
Yeah, even if it was 11 points and Alonso lost at least about 40.
But Ocon lost some as well. Ocon did lose some as well. He just doesn't make as big a song and dance about it. I think that's the thing. And I mean, it was quite funny, wasn't it, reading those comments from Ocon a couple of weeks ago after the season finished.
Yeah.
Talking about the fact he had to do all the work behind the scenes, which, honestly, maybe it's because I'm not Alonso's biggest fan. Does not surprise me for 1 second either.
Well, you know that Hamilton only started using the simulator because Max was so good in 2021. Before 2021, Hamilton never used simulators.
Hamilton just didn't. Yeah, but Hamilton was still winning world championships.
Yeah, he didn't need to.
All over the time.
Yeah,
but no, there's a difference between using the simulator and not doing any PR work for the team.
Oh, well. Alonso's
like, all the drivers hate doing the PR work. Only some of them. I mean, Hamilton stopped doing track walks for years, and the fact he can still come in, show up to a circuit on Thursday night or Friday morning, and still just run rings around everyone goes to show just how good the GOAT is.
Before 2021, maybe, yeah.
Still now, my friend. Lando Norris. What do we say about Lando Norris, apart from he's different gravy and still slept on by a lot of people?
He is massive.
That McLaren should not have been that far ahead of those two Alpines, nor should he have been battling them as often as he did.
No, not at all. And he the car was certainly not the 4th fastest this year.
No. And nor did it finish 4th.
Yeah, true. But he did effectively he only lost to the top 3 teams in the championship.
Yeah, he did absolutely everything he could.
Comfortably clear of Ocon and Alonso. So
yes,
he has to go a different grade. For me, he was probably the second most impressive driver this season.
I would completely agree with you. I think that is completely fair. Roy Nissany was definitely our driver of the year.
And we might be British, but I don't really care.
No, there's no. I think this is the thing, isn't it? Lando Norris is. I think it's kind of that weird thing. I think that a lot of people seem to believe it's British bias when actually it's just the fact Lando Norris is on the next level. Both him and George are phenomenal. People just don't like the fact that because it's still quite a British dominated sport in terms of the media as well, people don't like to accept that those two are definitely world champion material.
Yeah.
And that's they could be British, they could be from anywhere. those two are mega. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Lewis Hamilton
indeed.
Up next.
And yeah, really curious one. And I know Matt's going to bang the drum about he was testing the car, so it doesn't count the first 8 races.
Damn right I am.
But Hamilton was at least... It was still a very great season, certainly from the point of... Canada onwards. After Baku, Canada onwards was top from him. And he is quite unlucky to have finished 6th in the end. He probably should have got 4th. At the least.
If Mercedes, even if they just had the car they had throughout the rest of the year, if they just had the data from the start of the season, I will genuinely say I reckon he could have been right in that fight with Perez and Leclerc, if not maybe finished runner-up this year.
That's 68 points. I'm not sure he lost that many points.
George Russell was right there still, and you think how much better Lewis was throughout most of the year than George.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to... I'm not going to say it was a guarantee, but I think if they had the car they had throughout the year... But with the data they had from Canada onwards, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, Hamilton pretty much matched them from points there on anyway. Maybe even outscored Checo.
I think he was still behind
Charles.
Both, but not by a lot, if I remember correctly. Because he obviously had... There were a few weekends where Hamilton did drop absolute nothing races. Such as...
Sadly, I watched one of them, Imola.
Yeah, Imola, and also...
Saudi.
Belgium and Saudi and...
Well, Belgium, Alonso took him out.
Did he?
Yeah, I'm joking.
Did he?
No, Hamilton. Yeah, I can back my man, but he did also, ruin himself at Belgium.
Yeah. It was still a great season, but it certainly wasn't his finest by any means.
This is the thing, isn't it, with Hamilton? Like, we can say all this, and by Hamilton standards, this was trash.
It was his worst season of all time.
First ever year in Formula One, but still, when the fact we're comparing the drivers compared to each other. Goes to show, that Hamilton has still absolutely got it, hasn't he? And I think great season certainly is there.
I would argue below Alonso, but
really?
That's just me.
Oh.
Do it.
I don't...
Just to appease the comment section.
I don't... I think they're on par. I'm going to say they're on par.
Much like 2007.
Well, Hamilton beat Alonso in 2007, just like he did this year, but... I'm going to keep swapping them over. Every
for the rest of the video.
Yeah, exactly. No, it wasn't George Russell. Sorry, next was it was Sainz. Carlos Sainz in P5.
Yeah.
After the highs of 2021.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, I think it's been a difficult season for Sainz. It's interesting because, he has obviously ticked off a few important things in terms of the first win, first poles. But it's kind of become obvious that he's not the driver that we thought he might have been after 2021. And
the driver we'd hoped he would have been.
Yeah, and he's definitely Ferrari's number 2. And I think he knows that, and he's kind of trying to get on top of it as soon as possible, obviously. But I don't think he will, to be honest. And
Charles Leclerc has a lot more power in that team than I think a lot of people realise right now. He is effectively the Kylian Mbappe Ferrari, pretty much at the moment.
Mbappe is probably a bit better than Leclerc is in his sport, but there we go.
Okay, I don't know enough about football. I'm not going to argue about that.
But. Fair. But I think Sainz. Yeah, he probably should have at least been 4th in the championship, given how much better the Ferrari was than the Mercedes for most of the season.
Not helped, of course, by the fact we give Charles Leclerc a lot of sort of leeway because he's racing for Ferrari. I think it's only fair that we give Sainz the same respect as well. A few unforced errors here and there, a couple of unlucky moments as well, but the fact he was going to finish 6th this year in a Ferrari that should have been battling for the World Championship. Red Bull had a quicker car throughout a lot of the year, but it should have been a bit closer, shouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Do we put him at the bottom of great or the top of good?
Wow, fair. I was going to go lower than that.
Really?
I was going to go top of average.
Oh, I think that's a bit unfair. I wouldn't say he had a worse season than Zhou Guanyu or Nyck De Vries.
True. I would argue Magnussen was more impressive than Sainz though this season.
You know what? I completely agree with you.
So maybe middle of good.
Let's put him there.
Yeah.
Behind Kevin Magnussen.
That's fair.
That is. I think we'll agree there.
We've gone from Sainz lovers to Sainz haters in a year. All the comments last year. I remember this video last year. We got so much abuse for saying that Sainz was better than Leclerc.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. George Russell, Jamie. Again, we just spoke about him. A weird year again. I feel like we're saying this about a lot of drivers, aren't we? First half of the year, mega. Then he tried to decapitate Zhou Guanyu, and things kind of went a little bit shaky. And then he came back after the summer break and just decided to play bumper cars for a couple of weekends. That being said, though, throughout a lot of the year, very consistent. And at the end of the day, outscored Lewis Hamilton in equal machinery, which not even Fernando Alonso can claim.
My goat, Nico Rosberg. Get him in different gravy. Yeah, I think much like the Alpines, kind of the wrong driver won the points battle, to be perfectly honest, based on the course of the season. But fair play to Russell. He did get that win. Obviously, the stars kind of aligned, and Verstappen did a favour by screwing Hamilton over. But yes, I think, it's definitely great. Same tier as Hamilton, but I think slightly below. But he's been exactly what Mercedes want in terms of the heir to the throne, almost.
Exactly. Between Alonso and Albon.
Yes, I think we've got too many drivers in grey, to be honest.
We have, yeah. Sorry. No, I don't. This is probably not. I don't think any of them deserve to get bumped down.
No, Vettel does.
Really? Are we dropping Vettel down for good, are we? Okay. Jamie's done that, not
been
me.
Off the nostalgia. Been it off. Get rid of it.
Been off the nostalgia, okay. Well, we're down to our final three then, Jamie. It's Sergio Perez.
Yes. And he is sort of a typical Red Bull second driver, even harking back to Mark Webber
A bit better than a typical Red Bull second driver of the modern era. I think, he's a bit like Mark Webber, isn't he?
Yeah, he's kind of not on par with their number one, but will pick up the pieces. Was it the start of the year? Yeah. That's...
When the car wasn't completely set up for Max, they were on par early on this year, or close to on par.
They were certainly closer.
Which shows how car dependent Max can also be, and also goes to show that Max... I think there's sort of this thing, isn't there, nowadays, of course, that Max is kind of viewed as like this god within Formula 1. And don't get me wrong. He is a talent that you only really get 2 or 3 of in a generation. But
he's not invincible.
He's not invincible. He's not unbeatable. And also, we've got to remember that he is also in a car that is completely set up for him. And you wonder how many other drivers we could talk about with the same praise as Max if they were given the same treatment he's given.
But then why wouldn't you, if you're Red Bull, give him that treatment? Because that's what...
No, exactly. I'm not saying it's the bad thing to do. I'm absolutely not saying it's the bad thing to do.
But it does make it quite a hard job for the second driver.
When you look at Mercedes or Ferrari, if they just geared their car towards one driver, it does make you wonder, doesn't it, for a moment?
Yeah, and I think there's a reason Verstappen is so keen to spend the rest of his career at Red Bull, to be honest.
Because no one will give him the same treatment they do.
Yeah, or he certainly... I feel like he's slightly less adaptable than people think. But this is about Perez, this section, of course. So
it is about Perez. It is quite funny that we immediately start talking about Max.
He picks up the few wins, obviously, the Monaco win, and
Singapore,
King of the Streets.
And
pole position. Was that this year, the pole in
Saudi?
Pole
position in Saudi, yep. Should have had that race victory as well, had he not been screwed by a safety car.
I still think Verstappen and Leclerc would have come back at him later in the race, but he was winning.
Pulling away early on and controlling it, Jamie.
It was about 15 laps in, wasn't it?
Yeah, but he still was in absolute control of that race up till then. And I think that could have made quite a change to his year overall. Potentially.
But ultimately, he did end up the season a long way off Max in qualifying and race trim. Unfortunate to not finish second in the end. But yeah, I think...
he had his reasons. Didn't actually make a difference.
It didn't make a difference
but
at
still.
Yeah, I think it was certainly good from Perez. I don't know if it was great, just because the step forward...
Are we saying Sergio Perez had a worse year than Esteban Ocon and Valtteri Bottas? Actually, no,
I would argue yes, he did.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Better than Seb?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Seb fans.
Yeah, Seb fans are going to be outside your house with torches tomorrow. Number 2, the man that should have been world champion, at least after round 3.
The only man we predicted correctly at the start of the season.
The only man we both predicted correctly at the start of the season and finished runner-up is Charles Leclerc. And I tell you what, Jamie, I remember us having a discussion, after, it might have been Bahrain, it might have been Australia, saying, you know what, we reckon that Ferrari car is going to go down in history as an iconic Ferrari car. And then it just went absolutely atrociously, didn't it? In
such
proper
typical
Ferrari style.
It was so... I think I said this similar thing last week, but it was... If you could have predicted a Ferrari season based... So say, you know they have a very fast car. The car is capable of battling for wins on a regular basis. If you could pencil a Ferrari season out in your head pre-season, you could have so easily landed on what actually happened.
Pretty much.
Which,
I don't get how a team can operate this consistently badly.
Yeah.
With such great
it's almost
materials.
Quite impressive.
It is, honestly. Like, again, people talk about how Ferrari are the greatest team in Formula 1. I know I've said this countless times before on the show, but it's actually impressive, with, especially before the budget cap, with how much money they've had, that they haven't won pretty much every year ever of Formula 1.
If you discount
They're one of the least effective teams I think the sport's ever had.
If you discount the half a decade where they were invincible, they're barely better than most other teams.
The thing is, well, what people forget is that half a decade when they
wasn't even Ferrari.
It was just when they weren't full entirely of Italians in the team. This is the thing, isn't it? They've gone back to full Italians, and it's just gone Pete Tong again. And now they've got rid of Bonotto as well. They've got through, I think it's 5 team principals since Mercedes or Red Bull changed theirs once.
Yeah,
Red Bull have never changed their principle, and Mercedes have once, and one of them was a Ferrari principle beforehand. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. I'm sorry.
But Leclerc, to be fair to him, in the circumstances, did have at least a great season.
Yeah, it was a great season from Leclerc still.
Yeah. The car, obviously the mistakes need to go, like the France era was huge.
I feel like France is remembered quite badly for him. It's kind of
Imola didn't help his cause either.
Imola didn't help his cause either. I think great season. Sorry, I don't think this year we can put him in different gravy. There were just a couple too many errors.
I think I would put him above Hamilton though, because the flash of speed. He's probably the fastest qualifier on the grid.
I would argue Charles Leclerc is up there with your Ayrton Senna's in terms of one lap pace.
One lap, he just always pulls it out last minute, which is a really incredible skill to have. But unfortunately, he's been done by a case of being a Ferrari driver this year.
Exactly. And whether he'll be able to steer that team in a way that Michael Schumacher wanted to, because that's the other thing, isn't it? You know, we've touched upon it a minute ago. Charles Leclerc is probably the only other Ferrari driver we've seen that's got control over that team in a similar way to Schumacher did, which most notably and most reported on, Sebastian Vettel absolutely did not on the other
he
hand.
never got it. Yeah.
So it does make you wonder whether we could still see Charles Leclerc as world champion at Ferrari.
Bring back Ross Brawn.
Is it going to take another 5 years and a lot of near misses? Who knows?
Who knows?
We'll have to wait and see. A podcast episode 604 when we discuss Charles Leclerc finally as a world champion. But we've only got one man left to talk about then, Jamie. And I mean, it's just an easy one, isn't it? Max Verstappen, driver of the year, wasn't he?
Definitely driver of the year. Been unreal for the most part. Of course, season started with 2 DNFs in 3 races, which wasn't great. But really, ever since then, he's kind of been untouchable. Incredible.
I think the biggest points deficit ever to come back from as well.
Really?
Albeit he had 19 races to do so. I don't think anyone's come back from him 46 points
46?
Behind.
Well, Vettel was 40 behind over the summer break.
Vettel was 42 behind, which is the second biggest gap ever in Formula 1.
I'd have thought Vettel came back from more in 2010 as well. But
No. Vettel was always right there. It's often forgotten about.
Hamilton would have done in 2016 had he actually won the championship.
Yeah, had he not had been absolutely Patronus.
Maybe he should have started well in any race.
Maybe. I mean, it is mad, isn't it? Like, I was thinking about this a couple of days ago, in fact, that Rosberg barely won that world title when Hamilton arguably had one of his worst years in Formula 1.
Yeah.
And he still almost brought it back in the end. But let's not talk about... I mean, it just goes to show how much Hamilton lives rent-free in your head, Jamie.
I was thinking about my man Rosberg.
And you have to talk about Lewis Hamilton still.
Nah, all about bringing up Rosberg, the GOAT.
Right, okay. I mean, Max Verstappen, 15 wins. Not many pole positions this year, but we've said it before. Max actually isn't that great a qualifier over one lap.
Not. His race pace is certainly the one versus his qualifying pace. Well, we saw that given he had about 16 chances to break the record for youngest pole sitter and didn't back in the day. I think it's been his best season yet in Formula 1. Yes. Only arguably, 2 poor races of his own accord. Obviously, the 7th in Silverstone was because he picked up a bit of damage. Yep. Singapore, that mistake against Lando, and then Sao Paulo was in a pretty avoidable crash with Hamilton.
It was completely avoidable.
Well, if Hamilton hadn't turned in, maybe.
You'd argue it was on purpose from Verstappen.
I wouldn't go near that subject.
Apart from that, though, pretty much an almost flawless season, wasn't it, from Verstappen?
Record-breaking.
Record-breaking, exactly. And I think it's fair that, him and Lando Norris, Lando didn't really ever have a car that could show just how good he's been this year. It would have been nice if McLaren, I reckon, honestly, if McLaren had the Alpine car this year, there might have been a few occasions where he could have rustled Mercedes' feathers a bit more as well.
Well, Alonso was, he got 2 front row
Alonso
starts, didn't he?
A couple of times,
top 3 starts, sorry.
I would have loved to have seen what Lando could have done in a top car this year. Is there anything else to add, though, Jamie? We've kind of rattled through these quite quickly. I'm just having a bit of a look through the order.
I'm fairly happy.
I'm fairly happy with that. I don't think there's much else that needs to be changed across the roster.
Where would you have put Romain Grosjean, out of interest?
Where would I put Romain Grosjean
down there
this year? He was down here. No.
Nah.
It's
don't know
impossible to
IndyCar.
say, Jamie. It's impossible to say. Anything else to add, though? Or have we managed to do a tier list that wasn't too controversial?
I think we've smashed it, to be honest.
I think we have absolutely nailed this. Let us know down in the comments below how badly wrong you think we've got it over the course of this year, because I'm sure there will be a lot of people telling me that Verstappen had a doo-doo year, Lando Norris is bad, and Fernando Alonso is still the greatest to ever do it, despite being 56 years old and getting beaten by the... I've heard Esteban Ocon described before as the rat from Ratatouille, which I think is quite funny.
That's quite harsh.
Or is it the one from Flushed Away or something?
That's very much more reasonable.
Off the top of my head. But thank you all so much for listening as always. We will be back next week. We don't actually quite know yet what we're going to do next week, but it's going to be another fun winter-themed podcast. But yeah, like I said, let us know how badly wrong we got this down below, and we will return very, very soon with more Knowing Wheel.